and welcome to B Shifter. Today it's Nick Brunacini, Josh Blum, and John Vance hanging out, and we're still taking questions. We have a plethora of questions that have come in from Blue Card and Blue Card users and some B Shifter fans that have just, they've seen us on and they want to ask some questions. So we're going to do that. We're out here for the Big Box Workshop. We're looking forward to that a little later on this week. And the podcast after this one, you'll hear Shane Ray, who will be sharing some information with us about big box fires and whatever else is happening. So we're looking forward to him being here and talking a little bit to us next time. But this time around, let's talk about some of the questions that we've gotten. First of all, I have one that is, Dear Chiefs, we have a proliferation of 4- and 5-story buildings over commercial occupancies. What would you say is our main tactical considerations for fires in these sort of buildings? Now, these have fire protection systems, but they still are getting minor fires. And in particular, this writer has an issue because there are several currently under construction in their first due area. So what experience have you had with those?
It's interesting in the fire service. It keeps coming up that this is a new problem, and really it's not. I think like 20-some years ago is when they really started throwing these things up all over the place. When we started seeing a bunch of them being built around the Cincinnati area anyway, and then I know that Pacific Northwest got a ton of them getting built, and now everywhere we go they're popping up. So one thing with the critical factors is you got to get out and visit those buildings, because really starting with arrangement starts to become a problem for them because they're building them on top of each other, or you have limited access in and around those buildings due to parking garages or initial arrangement, and then like arrangement as far as gaining access actually inside the building. And then, John, you said something about they're protected, and those commercial spaces on the first and second floor or above maybe sometimes are fully sprinklered and protected by a regular 13 system, but all that residential space typically is protected by a 13R system, which, that difference is the 13 system is designed to protect the property. The 13R system is just designed to give enough time for occupants to get out. And then that understanding with the critical factors on that 13R is it's only in the living space. It's not ever in any void spaces in an attic or any void throughout the building. So anytime a fire, if it grows beyond, that room and contents space, the sprinkler system, could easily be overwhelmed in that case. And I mean, the sprinkler system's fantastic, and it's there for the life piece as far as getting people out. But we have to have that understanding that when it gets beyond the room and into void spaces, then it's not protected. So I think that's just a whole nother factor for us to think about and consider.
Well, that's a big deal too, because the tactic at an offensive fire, and one of those is pretty much protect in place. You're not going to dump the whole building. But like you said, if it's in the living spaces and it gets into the structure, the sprinkler system in most cases isn't up there, so it's going to take off in the structural components, and you're not going to be able to protect in place, especially if it's spreading across floors and through the attic. I mean, you're going to have to dump everyone out of that building because the building's probably most likely going to burn down at that point. And that's kind of what happens to them, or they suffer significant amount of damage before they get fire control.
I think one thing that we're seeing as far as these buildings when they're occupied is not just these buildings. I guess it's every building, Nick, that we look at in history. When fires start on the outside of the building, it's not generally a good outcome. So a lot of these fires that have started on the outside of the building, grow very quickly because it runs right up the outside, gets into that attic space or into a void space, and then we never get ahead of it. And don't quote me on it, but it was right outside of Detroit, John. Maybe you might remember this. It was like a senior living facility, and the fire started, I think, on a grill maybe outside.
Yeah, West Bloomfield.
Yeah, West Bloomfield. And that first due company, I think, that company officer made some great decisions and said, we're going to burn this thing to the ground. But they just went into straight rescue mode because there was too much fire for them to do anything with the amount of water they have available right now. But, they went into, we just have to try to get as many people out of this as we can right now. And I think that lines up with something you said there, Nick, is when you get there and the critical factors are, I got a couple of rooms look like they're burning, That's much different than when I pull up and the structure's already involved. So making that early decision of, are we going to have to evacuate this, which becomes a whole nother, challenge and problem for us. Around us, they're putting in a lot of these 55 and over buildings. And, when they put them in 10 years ago, now the people living there are 70 and 75 and almost becoming almost like an assisted living. So that's just a whole nother challenge that we have to face. So I think there's a list of critical factors that we have to evaluate, but it all ties into the system. When we get there, what is really going on? And then that helps us develop the incident action plan of what we can really do.
Well, and one of the challenges with them is we lived in one of those places in South Bend when we were doing stuff with clay all the time. And we were staying there enough that we thought, well, it's going to be cheaper just to rent an apartment. So that's where we rented it. And it was a 6-story building across the street from Notre Dame. And basically the university built it. Just gorgeous building, huge, hundreds of millions of dollars to build this thing. And I remember it was so big that I think it was like 1,500 steps from our door to our car in the garage, and it was all connected under the same roof. So you had this massive concrete parking structure that became the anchor for 2 city-long apartment buildings with commercial on the first 2 floors of it. So there's just, if you got a working situation at that thing, well, the one that we lived in South Bend there, I don't know how long it would take all the fire departments to clear that building. I mean, it was literally, there were hundreds, maybe thousands of apartments in it. It was just massive. So it would, I don't know, it'd take hours to like actually verify that every room was clear. So I think that's why you start using alarms and other things like that and the PA systems in those. That's why they're built to that code. And like you said, the life safety piece of it is a lot of that we depend on self-evacuation. Because, I mean, especially if you're trying to fight the fire. And some of those operations, you can do one or the other based on the number of resources you have. So, I mean, it becomes a very challenging thing, especially senior problems in those kind of structures. You're going to need your neighbors to help.
Because of it being sprinklered, there's some local discretion that happens with those buildings too, where they put the parking areas. And I know with my area, we're putting parking areas below grade, either under the building or partially under the building, and then also under the parking lot. And what we ran into there is they restrict the weight that can be in the parking lot. So it's restricted. You cannot get a ladder truck in there. Mm-hmm. And they were the building folks, and it really wasn't the building official. It was more community development. What do you have to worry about? It's sprinklered. It's like, no, we still have, there's been sprinklered buildings that we've gotten our ladders up to and gotten people out of because they were sheltered in place. And for one reason or another, we had to get them out of there. So that's another thing to think of is the restricted access that you might have for ladder trucks and even pumpers if you have underground parking adjacent to that building.
We had the same issues with buildings they built here, especially in tight access places where there was a freeway on one side. And there were some of those properties we couldn't get a ladder truck on the property, period. There just wasn't enough clearance to bring the truck in. And the fire code traded off the sprinkler system in the thing. And you thought, well, if you need a ladder here, you're not going to be able to use it anyway. So it's thank God it's sprinklered.
Mm-hmm. What are we seeing as far as risk goes with the occupancies that are on the first floor? Because we're seeing, restaurants, mercantile, banks. I mean, what kind of risk do those pose? And I think on the other hand, you have to educate your companies that they are 2 different systems once you make the transition from commercial to the residential area.
That occupancy space is being built because that's what our society is looking for, and that's what they want. Like flying into here this morning, it looked like there was about 20 buildings over there close to the airport that are under construction on a big vacant lot, and it looked like the entire first floor was commercial. Well, they go to work, they ride some kind of transit, whatever, and then when they get back, they really don't want to leave. So it could be everything from a restaurant to a bar to a coffee shop to trinket place to, whatever. It's whatever those occupants are looking for. So when those restaurants are in there, just like every restaurant, that risk starts to become that vertical shaft that runs through those buildings that, by code is supposed to be protected, whatever 2-hour, rating, I think for the shaft that runs vertical through the roof and it runs through that occupancy space. but there's still a risk there that we have to understand what's really going on with that. And like we know at all these places is, they're throwing them up so fast. Is it totally sealed like it's supposed to be? And then in time, has somebody, breached that to do some kind of other work? So, there's some risk involved there. Talking about the two different systems thing, having that understanding of the system could have two different fire department connections, one supplying the 13 system, one supplying the 13R system. You could have like two different risers in two different places. So, that comes back to that pre-planning piece, which I think is so important for all of those places for the access. Can I get an aerial device into there? Can I not get an aerial device into there? The pre-plan part as far as the access is, how do I actually get into this thing? Because a lot of those places, when it's all commercial on the first floor, the entry points are limited from the parking, like Nick was talking about. There's direct access into like a parking garage. Well, we're not stretching through a parking garage to get to a stairwell. So where is the stairwells in these buildings to actually gain access? And, when we look at all the code, it's only a few hundred feet that they're allowed to have to travel for egress, to get out of the space or to get beyond, a door or whatever. We need to understand that so that we're not having to make, super long hose stretches to get into that space.
It was about 100 years ago, and I was in the northwestern United States, in a very rural part of the country. They had one of these facilities like this. It just happened to be a hotel. But so the first floor was all hotel stuff. And then you had a big concrete parking garage adjacent to it that connected that with the hotel part and everything else. So I'm there doing incident command, whatever class with everybody. And there was, at one point during the time there, we did a walk through the building and said, okay, if this building catches on fire, what should we do, kind of a thing. And so you get to talking to them and you're like, okay, let's say it's the most common problem you're going to have is typically a car in the garage or somebody sets their room on fire. So they're both sprinklered. Let's go over what you do and how you get here and your arrival order and all that. Well, during the first 15 minutes, they were going to have no more than 6 people, 6 firefighters on site. And they said, so where do we make the hookup in the stairwell to get? I said, no, you don't do anything. In fact, I would figure out where your sprinkler connections are and make sure that you got water to them. That's probably the best you're going to do. But as far as any kind of activity where you have to penetrate into that building more than 10 or 15 feet, no, you're not. You may help evacuate in areas, but you're not going to. Well, no, we have to, and it's in the very beginning and we have the best shot. No, you don't have enough people to do that. That's They usually don't do surgery until the anesthesiologist knocks the patient out. So you don't have an anesthesiologist, you're not going to do any surgery. You can't. You're going to need a minimum of 24 people in the first 10 minutes. Oh, that's going to take us 2 hours. Well, no, I wouldn't. I just tell them good luck. I do my pre-planning and figure out where my connections are, and that's what you're going to do. But, and I think that's a problem. You said it. These buildings are going up all over America. They build them wherever they'll let them build them, and most places don't look at the deployment capability of the fire department when it catches on fire. They're building them in places now where shit in downtown Los Angeles. If they catch on fire, you said under construction to start this. If it's under construction and you have fire showing, it's going to the ground probably, more than likely. It would be a miracle to put it out. Put a little wind behind it, and you're lucky you don't lose the whole block. I mean, it's vertical stack fuel that's got glue in it. It's explosive. We would have these apartment complexes that would stick cities, we called them. They catch on fire, and it's just what happened. It burns very hot and very fast. It's over quickly. It is the best part of it. They don't last long.
Yeah, the famous Houston rescue, there was one under construction, and they swung the ladder around. They had enough time to get the construction worker off the 5th or 6th floor, and then the building was done. The minute that boom moved away,
exactly,
the building was down.
And they used that ladder like a cherry picker. They just put the guy got in, and off he goes.
Yeah.
The crew's on Good Morning America the next day.
And, the other thing I've seen lately is some departments that are pre-deploying equipment to these under construction places. So we're going to put a cache of equipment on the 7th floor, and these are a little higher. But, man, I think that's dangerous.
I'd make sure it's insured, the equipment. Because if it's under construction, it goes off, you're going to lose it all. They just burn up, man.
Going back to talking about pumping those systems and understanding the systems that you have too. I mean, a lot of these are combination systems where the fire department connection is going to not only supply the sprinkler, but also the standpipe. Understanding how that works and understanding the pump pressures you're going to need. That's the reason for getting your crews into these places while they're under construction. Out at Fort Collins, Poudre, Colorado, really probably has the gold standard in fire department connections, because for those types of buildings, they have a giant placard, and on the placard it says what you're going to pump it at and what area of the building that fire department connection is supplying the water to. So if you're a mutual aid company or you're somebody not familiar with that first due area, you're going to know just from reading the placard.
Well, all these fire control systems are getting more complicated. They're not getting easier. So it's bigger tilt slab, big box style buildings is one of the first people you have to corral is the engineer, the building engineer. Once you get them, you got to handcuff them to you. You can't let them leave, because they're the ones that know where all the stuff is and can tell you. We need to be very aggressive with hooking up with responsible parties, especially bigger sites that do a lot of processes that we're not fully aware of. The thing that comes to mind is the Winston-Salem fertilizer thing. Well, they listened to the RPs and they had a much better outcome than had they not. So it's those kind of things. Is spending a few minutes in the front end gathering intelligence and people that can give it to you is a valuable use of your time, especially in the front end of that thing.
All right, second question. Hey, Chiefs, I know you've addressed this in the past, but I want to get more clarity on what is a division and when it should be utilized and even said on the fire ground. And that comes from Zam. So let's answer that question for Zam. When do we use divisions and when is it not a division?
A division, a tactical subunit. So in the old days, we called them sectors, divisions, and groups. And that is what the IC uses, the strategic level of the organization uses the tactical level to maintain their span of control over the incident operation. So a division is a geographical subset, tactical unit. So as we go around a building, we identify the front of it as Alpha, and then we go around Bravo, Charlie, and Delta are the sides. Well, there's a corresponding, we use the sides in the organization almost the same. So like we'll say, okay, it's the Alpha side. Well, some people say the Alpha side, others will say, well, it's the Alpha division. Well, a side isn't a division. It's just the side of the building. It's a geographic place. A division is a management subunit for the tactical level of the organization. Company officers, that's the officer assigned to manage a fire company, is not a tactical level officer. They're a task level officer. So they're a working supervisor. In the former editions, well, in fact, the second edition is the most current one of Fire Command. It talks about establishing divisions early. Our experience out of the recovery process of Southwest supermarkets is a side of a building and an organizational subunit are two entirely different things. The first in company can manage the problem on a side of the building, let's say. Well, that's what they're doing. They're managing themselves in a geographic place. We make the mistake of calling them the first division boss. They're not. They are a company officer managing their company. It has more to do with their responsibilities. That's what their responsibility is to manage their crew doing task level work. Tactical officers operate in the warm zone. So I guess to answer your question, Blue Card uses tactical level bosses to manage any attack position that has 3 or more companies assigned to it. So that's when I would assign a tactical level boss. Tactical level bosses typically are the same officers that manage the strategic level of the organization. So I worked in an urban fire department that had 50 engines, 1,800 people. So we use BCs as division bosses because they operated in the warm zone. When you operate in the warm zone, you're not tethered to air. So you don't have to rotate people through with that 15-minute work cycle thing. So you have a static boss responsible for all the companies working in that division. Is an IC working in a strategic level command post, when I make Alpha Division and I assign that to Battalion 2 and the 4 companies that are working in Alpha, Battalion 2 now is responsible for those units. I'm not. Now, I track them. I know where they are on my worksheet, and they belong to the Alpha Division boss, who is BC2. So that's who supervises them then. See, now, I'll go back. The reason we changed this, Southwest Supermarkets. We've gone defensive. We got PARs on everybody. We're going to burn the grocery store down. We figure out we get a mayday from the inside, from Tarver. Hey, I'm lost. Come get me. We had company officers managing the divisions. That mayday wasn't solved quickly. So after the first 3 or 4 minutes, it wasn't solved, and you started picking up more maydays from that operation, from the crews trying to save him on the inside. Well, that becomes a self-feeding, cannibalistic operation then. So what happened is the IC lost tactical level control over every company that was operating in the hazard zone because there were no warm zone bosses. Well, no, a captain can manage the Alpha Division. Sure they can, up until they find something else they'd rather do, or they're overwhelmed psychologically, so they flood back into the building in an attempt to solve the problem physically, which is what a task level boss does. They don't stay at the point of entry and manage that. So what you lose is all accountability into the hazard zone. That's what you are flirting with when you decide my company officers can do this because they know me. For whatever reason, it's just incorrect. So, and what happens, and we talked about this earlier, is it's just accidental success over and over again because one line puts the fire out. So it reinforces, well, captain on engine whatever did a great job being the division boss. Well, no, they didn't. What they did is they were a great task level boss, and they went in and put the fire out. So that's what happened. So, and I've said this any number of times, it's no different than if the secretaries show up and they become the division bosses. That works great up until a time you really need a division boss. And about the time that you get maydays and things like that, a high level tactical action going on in that division, that's where you need a boss to manage it.
The other thing that I hear kind of misused out there is using the division as the side or using the division as the floor without first putting supervision on it. So like the order is engine 3, go to division 3. Well, if you don't have a division supervisor for floor 3, you should just call it floor 3, correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that they picked up who knows where, but even the NIMS documents and definitions say that a division is the person that's responsible for the geographic area. And the crews that are working there, it does not say anything about that the third floor is Division 3. It's the person that would be working there responsible for that geographic area. So that's just one of those things I think that got floated out there. Maybe that somebody's teaching somewhere and they heard it, and then that becomes the way. So that it's not correct, and it does create confusion because certain companies get assigned to go to, like you said, Division 3, and then they're up there looking for, well, who's the boss? They should be right here in the stairwell somewhere where I'm going, or I'm going to assign you to Division Charlie, and then they get to the Charlie side of the building and they're looking for somebody. And it's like, well, there's nobody there that you're working for. They were mixing terms and complicating things and calling something that it shouldn't have been called.
The easiest way for me to make sense of it is I look at there's phases to incident operations. So in the very beginning, somebody calls 911, it's noon, and there's a 6-story giant apartment building, and there's a kitchen fire in the restaurant downstairs. So from 12 o'clock to 12:06, let's say, 3 or 4 task level units show up. 2, 3 engines and a ladder truck. Well, they're going to be managed by the first officer that arrived to the scene. They're going to be IC number 1. So that person takes command, and what they're going to do is they're going to put together an incident action plan that puts the fire out. And say, okay, I got to go to the seat of this. The fire is what's causing all the damage to the people and the property. So we're going to focus on that. So truly, the first management unit we establish every incident is the IC, is the strategic level presence, so we can build one incident action plan that solves that problem. And everybody has to work together. See, that's what the fire department does, is it's all company operations. So that first in officer knows, okay, I'm going to need a water supply. I'll hook up here. I'm going to go in here. And then the next company should support me this way. So we kind of do this deal where we're doing a Marco Polo trying to get around the fire, get enough stuff on it to make it go away. The only organizational unit for that is command, strategically. And then we use their task level identifiers. So their company ID. Engine 1 is command. Copy, engine 1, command. Command to engine 2, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Command to ladder, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Now, they're going to put them on the floor or somewhere else, but they're not in a division. There's no divisions. There's no one to run them. We got all these task level players that are trying to put the fire out. The second phase of that, you start initially with all that, is reinforce it when the BC gets there and they transfer command. So now Battalion 3's on the scene. I copy what you did, Jimmy. I'm going to take command from you, and I'm going to leave you on the first floor with Engine 2, and I got the ladder up on the second floor. So now you got that figured out. Well, let's say you say, okay, we got a working fire in the kitchen. We need another company here. So you got 3 companies on the first floor managing that. The next in BC, that IC, who's a battalion chief now, command to Battalion 4. I want you to take floor 1, Division 1. You got Engine 1, Engine 2, and you got Engine 4 on deck. Copy. Battalion 4 copy. I want to be Division 1, blah, 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 blah. Boom. Now I got a division boss who's responsible for those 3 companies. As those 3 companies need to cycle in and out of that hazard zone, the person that manages that is Division 1. It's not the IC. In fact, I'm not going to track anymore. I know who's in Division 1, who's responsible for them. But as far as who's on deck, I'm going to lose track of that 10, 15 minutes. If I want to know, command to Division 1, who do you got inside, who do you got on deck, basically. So that's the way you build an organization. If the shit hits the fan on the first floor, I got somebody there right now at the point of the attack that can control entry in and out of that attack position. If you don't have somebody that can control entry, you do not have a division boss. It is a tactical level requirement that you control who goes in and out. If you use task level bosses, where do they operate? At the point of the attack, not in the warm zone, so they can't do entry control. Pretty simple. This gets very confused by people. Well, no, I'm going to have my rescue soup group, Rescue 1, be there because that's what the tattoo says on his chest, and that's what we call it. It means the most to us. Well, no, we ain't a cult. We're going to do this the way it makes the most sense organizationally, and they're a forward operator. They're not a warm zone boss. Big deal. It's a little thing like that, and they think, no, we're going to use that. No, you ain't doing blue card then. That is 100% not. You load up your attack positions, and you have working company officers manage them. You do not have a tactical level to the organization. You're just bullshitting yourself if you think you do. There's dozens of NIOSH reports that all say the same thing.
Well, Zam, I think we answered your question there. If we didn't, let us know, and we'll tackle it again, but it's pretty explanatory, I think, from what we said there. You guys ready for a timeless tactical truth?
Always.
Timeless tactical truths. These are the cards available at the B-Shifter store, by the way, from Alan Brunacini, Timeless Tactical Truths. And this is the King of Diamonds. And the King of Diamonds says, begin to package command for ongoing operation and escalation. Strong command, clear communication, standard strategy and action planning, sectors or divisions, SOPs. Again, begin to package command for ongoing operation and escalation. How does the blue card system lend itself to that?
I think we just talked about it, like 100%. It starts with the mobile IC, got there on engine one, established command, assigned a few companies. The strategic IC gets there, and if need be, or in a lot of systems, there's a command transfer. Now, the strategic IC has it. If the incident continues to escalate, they put tactical bosses forward, call for additional resources. So I mean, that's the system. And it starts the same way every single time. And I think we keep talking about this whole program as a system. And as long as you understand the system, then you apply it to any incident that you go to and any kind of an event and any list of critical factors. So, I mean, yeah, I think it is the blue card system. We grow the system based off the critical factors and the need to actually grow the system to improve the safety system and our ability to do the job on the fire ground.
The initial operation that I described earlier is the most effective form of manual fire suppression in the fire service, of manual. And manual fire suppression is the least efficient form of fire protection because the fire's already started. We have to show up and put it out. But during my career, I would be the first arriving command officer to the scene. So I'd get there 4 to 6 minutes into the deal. Less than about half the time, I wouldn't transfer command because the initial operation put the fire out. It did everything it was supposed to do. They got there, they did it, man, boom, boom, boom. It happened just like it was supposed to. So as you get there is the strategic position IC, and you see that, I would leave command with the current IC, and then we would do a little after action review. Everybody hug and kiss, and off we go when it was done.
Let's define for folks what strong standard command is. Because we hear Bruno talks about strong standard command a lot, but you don't always hear it. So what is strong standard command?
Initial radio report. You establish command with an initial radio report, and it's a standard. So you talk about the building, the occupancy type, where the fire is, and the action you're going to take. And then you conclude that with the strategy and the assumption of command. That is the standard front end. In response to that, and that's how we use a single incident action plan. So in the old days, it used to be we all got to the scene at the same time, and it was competitive to get first water on it, and then it was all SOP based. Well, 10, 15 minutes into that operation, nobody knew where anybody was or what they were doing. It just turned into a free-for-all, especially if the fire didn't go out. Now you got a more senior fire that's affecting more of the building with people in bad places. So that standard front end, the litmus test for that is I'm responding as the chief, and I'm going to be the reinforced IC strategically. Is if I get to the scene and I can transfer command quickly, and then keep that incident action plan going and add to it and adjust it if it needs to, that's standard command. Is the ability to do that. Standard command. The ability to, as soon I'm in my command post, managing the operation, in the middle of it, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday comes over the radio, I can take effective action immediately after that transmission to start getting that incident back under control and resolving that Mayday situation. That's what standard command does. See, and it's practiced. So we've done it a lot, and we figured out what works and what doesn't. Like using, as an example, we won't use task level supervisors as warm zone tactical bosses because they don't go together. It just doesn't work. So stuff like that. That's the standard stuff. When people say, well, we're doing blue card. Well, there's about 5 or 6 things that you're doing blue card. Standard initial radio report to establish command. One person's in charge. Everybody else stages. They don't go to work until they're assigned by the IC. Any attack position got 3 or more people. You put a boss in charge of it. That's not to say you can't use a captain to run a tactical subdivision. They just can't be a working company officer that has a crew assigned to them. That's not the role they play. But like if you use, let's say, safety officers as an example that are company officers, if you want to use them, in fact, a better use of them is a division boss than a safety officer. They'll have more safety impact as a division boss every time. That's why we embedded safety within the division, is that's where you're going to manage the safety. It's probably most important to manage safety in the attack positions first. That's where you're going to have most firefighters that would be exposed to the things that you're trying to protect them against.
Just another little piece of that is that the incident action plan is communicated over the radio and that everybody's on the same page, which is just another part of standard command, so that there's no secrets. Everybody knows what is going on. And then it's communicated over the radio when those things are complete. And more importantly, maybe if they cannot be completed. So I think that's just another standard command piece.
And he says clear communication. So that's part of the clear communication, that everybody on the fire ground knows what those orders are. And there are no secret orders that were given face to face from the IC to other subsequent arriving companies or chiefs.
You know, another blue card thing, and this is more tactical in nature, but water on the fire. We are just crazy for water on the fire. Put the fire out, and every time you put the fire out, it gets better. It doesn't get worse. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. And sometimes we don't do that. We get distracted by other things, and we shouldn't. That's why we said the initial operations responsible for fire control. If they'll put the fire out, we'll protect more people and more property at the end of the day than any other single activity. We've saved more people's lives in structural firefighting by doing fire control than right-hand wall searches. It's just the truth of the matter.
That wraps up this Bee Shifter. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have questions that you'd like either the ops chiefs or the chiefs to address, that email address is in the show notes. Also, we want to invite you to subscribe. That's the way we continue to build the podcast, either on YouTube or on wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to the Bee Shifter Buck Slip. The link to that is also in the show notes. Until next time, thanks for listening and watching Bee Shifter.